I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. As soon as I got my Tactical Air Command qualifications and was considered combat ready, one of the squadrons at Seymour was temporary duty to Korat Air Base and was beginning to participate in the Vietnam War in the operation called Rolling Thunder. The Air Force was trying to interdict all of the communist supplies that were coming from China through North Vietnam to support the insurgencies in South Vietnam. Our job was to hit railroads and supply lines and warehouses and things to slow that, to try to stop that or slow it down. May the 8th of 1966 was the day that was going to affect my life forever. This was my third time up north in what we call Route Pack 6, and that was the area closest to the Chinese border. We went to the briefing rooms, got the weather reports, and for the third day in a row, my targets were weathered in, and so I was going to have to sit that out at least until the afternoon briefings. Might get a chance to fly in the afternoon. But I went to the ops officer in the planning ready room and was kind of grumbling. He said, "What's up?" And I said, "Well, I've been weathered out for the third day in a row." I said, "Any chance of me plugging in as a spare or as a sub for one of the other guys that's been flying several missions recently?" And he looked around and he did. He changed me, put me into one with a target that was not weathered in. Turned out it was going to be the farthest north target, northeast of Hanoi, that we were allowed to hit because of its proximity to the Chinese border. It was a very highly controlled target. It was a railroad bridge. There was a good choke point. And because politically, the U.S. wanted to not do anything, even to allow something accidentally to happen that would provoke China to get into the war, as they did in Korea. Things were so tightly controlled that the enemy knew that that was the target. That was the only target we were allowed to hit in that area. So you don't have to guess very long to guess where all of the anti-aircraft guns and the surface air missiles and the enemy defense aircraft were going to be focusing their attention. And so that was the reason that that target claimed a lot of American planes and pilots. We flew east out over Thailand, southern part of Laos, and the southern part of North Vietnam to the Tonkin Gulf, rendezvoused with the KC-135 tankers. We all refueled, and then as we finished refueling, we headed north to a checkpoint on the coast where we turned inland. And as we came abreast of our target, we were flying probably 200 or 300 feet above the ground to take advantage of terrain masking from enemy radar, and started what we call a pop-up maneuver. And when you're about 2 or 3 miles abeam the target, you pull up from just above the ground to about 8,000 or 10,000 feet and roll in on your target and do a high-angle dive bomb. And each of us was carrying 2 3,000-pound blockbuster bombs to try to take out that railroad bridge. And the flight lead had directed me, we were going to go down the chute in formation. Take what's called a fighting wing position, where you're back, you're close, but you're giving yourself and the flight lead a lot of room to maneuver. You have to be very agile stay as close as you're comfortable with. But then when you get to the top of the pop-up and he's rolling in, I was behind him and just slightly to the outside of the turn. And as I anticipated where he would roll out from being pointed down toward the target, I came back across to be on his right wing as we went down to attack the target at the same time. And just as I crossed under and behind his airplane was when I felt the hits. It was pop, pop, pop. I had one little yellow flickering caution light, but I didn't worry about that because at this point we're probably within 5 or 10 seconds of bomb release altitude. And so as we're going down and we drop our bombs, he rolls off to the left. As I pull the nose up through the horizon and start heading back out toward the Tonkin Gulf, I see now I've got a number of yellow caution lights and some red flashing lights, and I know what I've got is a lot more serious than I had thought originally. The flight controls are starting to get kind of stiff, and then all of a sudden the plane pitched up and then down and then up, and I'm being jostled around in the cockpit. So instinctively, I hit what we call a paddle switch. It's right in front of the control, on the front edge of the control stick. And what that does, it disengages your stability augmentation system. That's a fancy word for power steering in an airplane. So I clicked those off and let go of everything because I'd learned that it's better off on its own to aerodynamically dampen itself out. Because if you try to help it and you get out of cycle, you can make it worse. And so I let it dampen itself out and then slowly got the hand on the stick, began pulling back up and controlling where I was going. This time the controls are getting very stiff, and I notice there's a particular light that's flashing that says inlet pressure low. And I remembered from our training, if you see that inlet pressure low light, that means you're very low on fuel and flame out is imminent. So, and at that point, the lead calls again and says, Bamboo 2, you're on fire, get out. The light in the landing gear handle begins to blink. That made me glance at my hydraulic systems, and all 3 of my hydraulic systems had gone just about to zero. That's why the flight controls were stiffening up. The flight lead calls for the 3rd time in these voices about 3 octaves higher. He says, Bamboo 2, you're on fire. Get out, get out, get out. The thing is, when you're going that fast, you're going 500 knots. So many things are happening. Trying to analyze all of the things that your warning lights are telling you. Decide whether you can stay with the airplane long enough to get across the coastline. And if you can get out into the South China Sea, if you're inland, your chances of being rescued are 0 in that area. But I was still probably at 10 to 15 minutes from that time from getting to the coastline, or what we call getting feet wet. The first time he said that, I glanced around and I'm not in any danger, and so far I don't see any fire or overheat warning lights. It could have been that those circuits had been severed by the incoming rounds that hit me, but when he called the 3rd time, it was probably no more than another 4 or 5 seconds that I raised the ejection handle. They're built into the top of your seat. You raise them up, it exposes the trigger that actually fires you out of the cockpit. It also blows the canopy off, so it's out of your way. And just as I was about to squeeze the handles, another totally insignificant but highly memorable thing happened. Just before I squeezed the ejection seat handles to go out, I noticed my checklist was floating like in a zero G, and I realized that I thought about this later and figured it all out. When you're flying close formation with a flight lead, you always have a little bit of forward trim, so you don't ever get yourself into a null area with your control stick, because you have to have positive control immediately at all times. I had a little bit more forward trim in there in my excitement and everything that was going on than I realized. So when I let go of the stick that time and raised the handles, it began to go into kind of a zero G descending arc, and that checklist just came up and was just floating. And that's the last thing I remember when I pulled the ejection handle, and then everything went black.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is POW being 3
May the 8th that year was Mother's Day. But because of the international date line, it was already pretty late in the evening back in Conroe, Texas, where my mom and dad lived. And so the Air Force, in their wisdom, they delayed telling my mother and dad about my situation until the next day. They met my dad in Conroe at his school, and then together they went over to see my mom. She was a secretary at the Sam Houston Elementary School, and told her that I was missing, and that the guys had seen a good parachute, and it was presumed that I was captured, but there was no confirmation for several months. As you go up so fast, it momentarily drains the blood out of your head, and you black out from hypoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain. I remember coming to when I felt the jolt of the parachute and realizing, okay, I'm awake, why can't I see anything? And I reached up to check my mask, and there was no mask there. It was slick. And I realized that when I had hit the wind stream at close to 500 miles an hour, something had happened, and it had turned my helmet 90 degrees, and my oxygen mask was over here, and I'm trying to look out through the earphones, and that doesn't work. And so I got rid of the oxygen mask, and the chin strap, started pulling on the helmet ears and spread it out enough that I could pull it around. When I did, I looked up, I had a good shoot. I looked down when I realized I'm within 15 or 20 seconds of hitting the ground. And so when I got to the ground, I thought I was okay. But then I heard a shot and some yelling off in the distance. And I started to put all of my survival school and escape and evasion techniques to good use for about 4.5 minutes. I was trying to get across a gully. There was an area where I thought I could run up this gully and get into a wooded area and then kind of hide my evasion. I wanted to get out of that area where people could have seen the parachute coming down, and then plan some exit out of that area. But as I was running along this gully, as I got toward that wooded area, and I ran up the side of the gully a little bit to look out, and this guy's running along right beside me, tracking me, and he's following close by. And when he saw me, he ducked back, thinking that I might be armed and might start shooting at him or something. And then it wasn't very long, and I heard people coming up the gully behind me, and I looked back, and there were my big muddy boot prints coming along there. A tenderfoot scout could have tracked me anywhere I was going to that point, because I just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was no place to go, no place to hide, so I was captured pretty quickly.